Natalia Bonner. Welcome to 9 Patchalong Block 6. If you're just joining, make sure you do check out the links below where we've got information about this whole entire stitch along. We're stitching 9 patch blocks. So much fun. Today we're going to be using my mini 4-in-1 and my mini inside out machine quilting rulers. Let's get stitching. I'll start out this block design by stitching in the lower left corner. Now, as I'm stitching this out, you may recognize a couple of these block designs from my Stitch Along Let's Stitch a Block a Day 365 quilt block designs using my machine quilting rulers. So hopefully with what I'm sharing here, you're being inspired to use those block designs to really dress up quilt blocks. They don't just have to be used on a single block. All right, so once I've stitched that angular line all the way across the 9 patch, from there I'll travel down the ditch, and then from there I'm going to stitch the first X. When I get up to the top of the block, I'll adjust my ruler, and now I'm going to stitch an angular line going the opposite direction. I'm going to repeat this process, stitching until I stitch right back to where I began. So you can see that I'm creating kind of these little sections of straight lines. Once I've completed that second set, then I'm going to adjust my machine quilting ruler, stitch down the ditch on the side of my block, and then repeat that process one more time. This time, once I've stitched back to where I began stitching, now I'm going to again travel down the ditch to the bottom of my block. In that bottom corner, then I'm going to stitch an angular line all the way through to the opposite side of my block. Now this is a point for a 9 patch block. I could leave my block quilted just like this. This would be plenty of quilting and I would have a beautiful quilt block design. However, let's dress this up just a little bit more. From that corner where I began stitching, I'm going to travel over, moving across my ditch 1/4 of an inch. From there, I'm going to stitch an echo all the way around the outside of the X that I have stitched in this red block. Once I've stitched all the way around, so I'm adding that echo, it's 1/4 of an inch on the outside. So I line up my machine quilting ruler so the edge of my ruler is right on top of my previous stitch line. Then from there, I stitch up until the side of my foot touches my thread, then I'll adjust my ruler and repeat that process. So I will stitch that same pattern in all of the red blocks. Then I'm going to stitch in the green blocks a different design just to add a little bit of interest. So in the top triangle on that green block, I'm going to fill that in with those fun back and forth matchstick lines. So I'm not necessarily using my ruler here for spacing, more or less just to keep my lines nice and straight, and I'm trying to keep my lines as close together as I can. So somewhere maybe around 1/8 of an inch apart from each other. Once I've completed those straight lines in the first block, then you'll see that I'll actually kind of just jump over to the next green block where I'll again stitch those straight matchstick quilted lines. Once I've completed the matchstick lines in that green triangle, then I'm actually going to travel up the ditch across the top of the block, and then I'm going to again fill in that triangle, the top one, with those back and forth matchstick quilted lines. Once I've completed the matchstick lines, then I'll travel across the top of the block, moving over 1/4 of an inch, where again, like I did on that first block, I'm going to add the echo all the way around the outside of the X. Once I've completed that, then I'm going to stitch in the ditch. So I personally love the look of stitch in the ditch, so sometimes it is going to require me to stitch over my lines, add a backtrack, something like that. But it is something I am going to do, and I'm going to use also to help me travel from one point to another. So I've traveled down now, and I'm going to fill in on the left side of my block. So you're watching this as if you're standing behind my machine, so it appears here like the right side of the block. I'm now going to fill in that next triangle with those simple, straight, back and forth matchstick quilted lines. From there, once I've completed those matchstick lines, then I'll travel down to the bottom red block where I'll again stitch that echo around the outside of the X. Once I've stitched the echo around the outside of that X, now I'm going to travel up to that center red block and repeat that process one more time, stitching an echo around the outside of the X. From there, now I'm going to travel down to that bottom green block, where at the bottom triangle that I've created, I'm going to fill in with those simple, straight matchstick quilted lines. From there, then I'll travel up the ditch along the side of that block, continue traveling all the way up. And then I'm going to start working on the center row, the green block. I'm going to fill in that top triangle, again with those simple, straight matchstick quilted lines. Once I've completed that triangle, now I'm going to travel down my ditch to the bottom of that triangle and actually jump over to the red block where I'm going to stitch that echo line around the outside of the X. Once I've completed that X outline, then I'm going to travel up to the green block where I'm going to complete that middle row green block by filling in the bottom triangle with those matchstick quilted lines. And now I have one block left to fill in with those matchstick lines. So I'll, from that point, travel across the ditch. Personally, I work best from left to right. So sometimes you will see that I will travel over a ditch when you may think it might be unnecessary. But if it feels more comfortable for me to machine quilt a design from left to right, sometimes I think it's worth just traveling back over to the left side and then stitching out that design. I hope you have all found just a little bit of inspiration from today's video. If you haven't yet, we do have companion workbooks for this fun stitch along and lots of other goodies and fun information on our website, peaceandquilt.com. Have a great day, everybody.